Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68 Media Network. I'm Ryan Wall, joined as always by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, Arizona had a dominant 93 to 65 victory against the Akron Zips in the round of 64 in the NCAA tournament. And they move on to the second round and look to win their third or look to advance to their third Sweet 16 in the last 4 years that Tommy Lloyd has been at the helm. Overall, this was a great performance. How are you doing today? And what'd you think of this performance?
I'm doing great, man. I'm getting my fill of basketball over the last few days. But yeah, they played great. I thought it was. We were talking before. You said you thought it was their greatest, pretty much offensive performance of the year. I completely agree. Trey Townsend, Carter Bryant, I think are playing at their peaks right now. I haven't seen these guys play at this level all year. I think we've seen flashes. I think all year of Carter Bryant specifically. I think probably the game in Tempe at ASU, I think was probably his best performance, and I think he eclipsed that a little bit yesterday in this
Yeah.
game. And same with Trey Townsend. I think his ability of just being able to, I think his first three within the first 2 minutes of the game, that was huge. I would not have expected him to have the guts to take a big shot like that, like first game back in March since he was with Oakland, and then just his ability to score around the rim, I thought was pretty elite. Uh, and
Yeah.
yeah, they played great from top to bottom, and they didn't even really need Caleb Love to really do much. He barely got into double figures, I think, towards the end of the game. So
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on Caleb Love in a minute, but yeah, as you mentioned, Trey Townsend has really come on lately. He scored 10 plus points in three of the last four games. That one game that he didn't score double digits, he actually scored zero two
yeah,
games ago. Well, so it's kind of, he's still inconsistent, and finding that consistency will be key for him and Arizona. But having 16 points on seven straight shooting from the field, that all season long, I've been saying he needs to take more field goals, and when he does, a lot of the times he is a productive player, and this version of him, not just hitting the three that he did early, but just him being a guy that they can give the ball in the post, and he can be physical and drive inside the lane. I really think just is a new wrinkle to this team if he can be an option there. And yeah, like you mentioned, this team, Arizona jumped out to a 9-0 lead like that in the blink of a second, and Jaden Bradley hit the first three-pointer, and when he hit that, I was like, this is going to be a special Jaden Bradley game. He finished with 19 points, six rebounds, three assists, two steals, 3 for 5 from 3-point land. That might be his best shooting night from deep that as an Arizona Wildcat, without a doubt. I mean, he was just because a lot of times, and he still was doing it a little bit, but a lot of times when Jaden Bradley catches the ball, he's so hesitant. And he showed that when he shoots the ball with confidence, his stroke is pretty good. He doesn't have a horrible shooting stroke. It just seems like more of a confidence issue with him. What do you think about Jaden Bradley in this one?
yeah, I agree. I completely agree, and I think him taking the most threes is also something that's very interesting. He only did shoot five, but what we know of this team is like Caleb Love's going to get at least 7 to 10 threes a game, and the fact that Bradley was the one leading the charge from deep, I thought was pretty interesting. But 48% from three, you're going to beat most teams doing that.
Yeah,
And I thought they played really well, and Bradley kind of could do pretty much whatever he wanted to do.
yeah, 56% from the field, 48% on 3-point shots for Arizona. They only were 3 for 10 from the free throw line. Wasn't one of their better nights from the strike, but I mean, this team, if they shoot it like this, it puts kind of maybe unrealistic expectations for the future in your mind, because although they are playing an Akron team, this was an Akron team that a lot of people were high on the MAC champions. The Zips were, a popular underdog pick in that 14-3 matchup in the first round. So Although it looks like it was big, Arizona was 14.5 point favorites, and they won by nearly 30 points in this one. So they really blew them out of the water. And you mentioned Caleb Love earlier, and I want to get into him because something we've always talked about with Caleb Love is that when Caleb Love isn't on, Arizona struggles to win basketball games. When he scores under 15 to 17 points, Arizona likely doesn't win. And number two, when Caleb Love likely isn't on early in the game and just doesn't have that spark offensively, he normally forces it, and that's when he ends up shooting 20 to 30% from the field, like he has done so many times. But in this one, he finished the game with 10 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 for 9 shooting from the field. So very efficient for Caleb Love, 2 for 4 from three. And he realized early in this game it wasn't his night, but he's going to try to help the team and and help everybody to best suit their game as much as possible. And he did just that. This was one of the best passing games from Caleb Love I've seen as a Wildcat. He was such a willing passer in this game. When he saw his teammates like Vasar and Carter Bryant and Jaden Bradley were so good in this game, he wanted to get those guys the ball. And I think that's a wrinkle that really makes Caleb Love a dangerous player, even if he isn't scoring 20, 25 points. Would you think about his, ability in different areas against Akron?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what seems like a lot of I think Arizona's framing in a lot of their big games is are they in a position where they need to be desperate and just get Caleb Love as many shots to see if he can get going as quickly and as much as he can. And I think their ultimate winning success is to not need a desperate Caleb Love to put up as many shots as he can to see if it's going to be an on night or an off night. And I think that was a huge thing. I think at the start of the years, they wanted different recipes of, okay, can we win without Caleb Love averaging 15 shots a game and having to get at least 20 points a game? At the start of the year, it didn't look that way. And a lot of that, I think, was because of the top competition they played. But it also I think opened up a lot more of his game, like what we saw yesterday, like 7 assists or 4 assists and 7 rebounds. I think is huge, and as much of his defensive game that's been kind of unlocked this year of him having to guard better players. I think that's been a huge thing for this team going forward, and it just opens up this team to more possibilities and better matchups. I think against better teams that are either going to force them to play a lot more defense or force other guys to shoot.
Yeah, 100%. And what we've seen in the recent years with Arizona, they've pretty much every year they've had one main guy. They've had Benedict Mathurin, then they had a Jules Tavelis, and then last year Caleb Love. And this was one of the first games in the tournament where they won without their main guy playing a major role scoring wise, and I think that really is just the best thing because when you have a team win, this was a complete team win. Everybody contributed. Anthony Delorso even added 9 points and 5 assists in this one, and
Yep.
he's another guy. He struggled a lot, but he got going, made 2 3 pointers, and he was excellent. And one of the guys that you mentioned at the top that has been one of, I think, our favorite players to watch in this Arizona team, and that's the freshman Carter Bryant. Uh, He scored 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 blocks, 5 for 8 from the field, 2 3 pointers. I just don't think that those numbers do him justice and what he did on the floor. He just was so good in this game in so many different areas. The energy that he brought with the crazy dunks, the blocks on defense. I mean, this guy, every time someone would drive by him, they couldn't even get a shot up. He was just blocking everyone. And yes, is that because Akron has a very small team and they don't have anyone on their teams taller than Carter Bryant? Their tallest guy, 6'7", the same as Bryant. That may be true, but just the level of aggressiveness and the energy that Carter Bryant played with in this game is unlike many that I've seen. And this was the first time in almost 2 months that Carter Bryant scored at 10 plus points. So it has been quite some time since he's reached double figures, but he only played 20 minutes. Obviously, the back half of the second half was the game was pretty much out of reach, but I just think he continues to prove that he's one of the most valuable players on this team, and he can just do everything. His shooting stroke is just beautiful. He is such a good defender, and I just think his game he has one of the more complete games on this entire team. And I think if he plays like that, along with an elite Townsend game, I really think that puts Arizona over the edge and can allow Arizona to beat any team in the country.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's, I think, one thing that I've kind of harped over the last few weeks is I think this Arizona team's biggest advantage is their bench. And it's, I don't want to say it's led by him because I think it's a three-headed monster with Vasar, KJ Lewis, and Carter Bryant. I think they all play very important roles to this team. They can, any single one of them really at any point in time could either start to hit their shots and be able to hit the long ball, or they can get out in transition, they can block shots, or they can get the bench going and get the crowd going with the crazy dunk, which three like these are probably a majority of the most athletic guys on this entire team. And I think it just takes, I think, their ceiling even higher with bringing these guys off the bench.
Yeah, Vasar had 8 points, 7 rebounds, 4 for
Quiet,
6 from the field,
very
and
quiet 8 and 7.
he had a couple massive dunks that looked like he was going to bring down the rim. I haven't seen him dunk that much in one single game all season long. It just every time he caught the ball, it seemed like he was wide open. As obviously they don't have anyone that was 7 foot tall. Overall, like I said towards the top, this was more one of the more impressive team performances and wins of the season. 93 Arizona, 65 Akron. They won this game by 28 points. It was a really great performance. This was Tommy Lloyd's fifth victory into the March Madness tournament while being the Arizona head coach. And yeah, moving on, Arizona now will face the Oregon Ducks and Jordan, although both teams after last season, left the Pac-12 conference as that ended and they moved to a different conference. Now they're going to play, and this is extending their streak of playing every single season or since 1977. So this longtime rivalry that ended a short while ago gets renewed, and the Oregon Ducks also had a very solid performance, 29-point win over the Liberty Flames. They had three guys in double figures. Jackson Shellstad led the way with 17, and this Oregon team is no joke. Arizona enters the matchup as a 3.5 point favorite. This game in this second round matchup will take place on Sunday night at 9:40 p.m. on the East Coast, 6:40 p.m. Tucson time. What do you think about this matchup against the Oregon Ducks?
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. I watched Oregon a little over a month ago, and they went into Madison. Wisconsin was up at least 20 at one point in that game, and they came back and beat Wisconsin in overtime and one of their only home losses all year. The big thing for me is Nate Biddle and how much he kind of wreaked havoc in Wisconsin in that game. And that's a thing that at odd different times that Arizona has struggled with Hunter Dickinson and how much of a role he is with that Kansas team and how much they struggled in Lawrence on their senior day. And that's a big matchup for me and how they can defend him with Alaka and Vasar.
Yeah, 100%. He's their best player, leading scorer, had 14 and 10 against Liberty, but he's shown that he's capable of 20, 25, 30 points on every given night. He is that talented of a big man. And yeah, I really think he's going to be a handful for Vasar and Awaka. I think Vasar is going to have to would need to guard him more than Awaka just because Nate Biddle is huge. He's a 7 footer. He is a big guy, and I just think he's too big for Toby Awaka. But they also have two very good guards. Keyshawn Bartholomew and Jackson Shellstad are both really solid guards. And yeah, I think Jackson Shelstad is going to be the guy that I think that they're going to need to make a priority, and Caleb Love and Carter Bryant, KJ Lewis are going to have to shut down if Arizona wants to win this game. But I just don't think when I've watched a lot of Oregon this year, and I've loved Oregon down the stretch. They were good and competed hard in the Big Ten tournament and when they beat Liberty the other night. But I just don't think this Oregon team has enough. I don't think they have enough off the bench. And I just think if Nate Biddle gets held under 20 points, I think Arizona could beat this team. And I don't think it's like with Arizona, the scenario where if Caleb Love gets held under 20, they still have a lot of avenues as they showed against Akron to win the game. I don't think Oregon has that. What do you think about this matchup? Do you think that Arizona will win, and do you think they can cover that 3.5 point spread?
Yeah, I think it'll depend. I think Oregon, especially you look at what they did yesterday against Liberty, shooting 47 from three and 54% from the field overall. I think it's going to depend a lot on Arizona on the defensive end and if they can force them into contested shots and if they can run those guys like you said, Barthélemy and Shellstad, those guys are really good 3-point shooters, both right around 40% from the deep ball. And Dana Altman's a great coach, man. Like I saw a stat, I think it was since 2000, the 2010-11 season, the Oregon kind of leads the entire country in wins in March and April. And if you're like at the top of that list over Duke, over North Carolina, over Villanova during some of those runs that they had, that's an insane stat. And coaching is a really big factor. And Dana Altman's a proven winner. And it'll be a tough game. I think it'll be really close, but I think it'll depend on who can defend the other team better because I think both teams can score a lot and very little, and it'll depend. I think it'll be a really high paced kind of game, and it'll like I said, it'll depend who can defend the other one better.
Yeah, you put that perfectly. When Oregon gets in the tournament, they don't mess around. They always win more than one game. It seems like every time they're in or more. I just don't think this is one of I think Altman's done a great job with this team maxing it out. I just don't think this team is as talented as Arizona's. I think they're good, but I'm gonna go with Arizona to win, and I think Arizona is going to. I think they're going to cover the 3.5 point spread, and that's because I said this to you earlier, but every win that Arizona's had this season, all 23 have all been by more than 3.5 points. Arizona doesn't hasn't been in a close game that they've won this season. They don't do that. So I got Arizona beating Oregon and moving on to their third Sweet 16 in the last 4 years and playing the winner of Wisconsin versus BYU. What do you think about this? And do you have Arizona winning this one?
I do, and I think my biggest reasoning would be the bench and kind of what we were talking about was the biggest separator in the Akron game, and kind of I think just the biggest advantage this team has in the field. To be honest, I would love to see somebody challenge me with a team that has a bench that's better than this. But I think Arizona will win, and I agree with you. I think they'll cover the spread, but I don't think it'll be much more than the spread.
Yeah, well, we're both on Arizona to win this game, which is in a big game hasn't been the case especially in the Big 12 tournament. But moving on, Jordan, before we go, I wanted to kind of get kind of a temperature of where we're at for Arizona, even maybe beyond this game, if there is, hopefully there is. Arizona will play the winner of Duke and Baylor, and they could potentially play the winner of BYU Wisconsin in the Elite Eight. But first, how do you? I think Duke's going to get past Baylor. I think Baylor. I've said this for weeks now. I think Baylor is way better than maybe their record and even better than their seeding. I think they're going to give Duke a very tough game, but I think Duke's going to win. And as we know, Duke beat Arizona this year by 15 points at home early in the season. Was in the first couple weeks of this season, so a lot has changed since then. How do you think Arizona matches up with Duke in a potential Sweet 16 matchup?
I think it's a very different game than the first one, and I think both teams the same. I think Duke. I think were just a little bit inexperienced with their freshmen, and I know we've talked about that was a thing I've really put against McHale of it did feel like they made that a really tough environment for those freshmen, but at this point, Cooper Flag, Conklin, they're not freshmen. It's April. They've went almost 30 games, if not over 30 games in major Division One basketball. They've pretty much completely steamrolled in a really bad ECC. They've looked really good. They were dominant from start to finish against Mount St. Mary's. It's a tougher matchup, but like I said, I do think Arizona is a lot different and better team than they were when they played at the time. And I think one of the biggest reasons is their bench, for one, and also Kurt Kriisa was also playing at that time. And this Arizona team is completely different, or not Kurt Kriisa, sorry, Montevious Krivas, and they've gotten a lot better since they've pretty much had to kind of change a lot of their minutes in their bench. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a huge difference. And I think this team's playing a lot better than they were then. I think they do match up pretty well, and I would say a big reason is because of Carter Bryant. I think his size and I think having an extra body like him that you can kind of throw at Cooper Flag, I think is going to help a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the size is the biggest mismatch in that Duke and Baylor game, and why I will agree with you. I think Duke will beat Baylor in that game, and that'll be the matchup if Arizona is able to knock off
Yeah.
Oregon and get to another Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think that would be an incredible matchup. It's the one I want to see, Duke versus Arizona. Sure, a lot of others want to see it as well. Be a fantastic Sweet 16 matchup. But yeah, I think Arizona, although we don't have to give predictions here. We already gave that before the tournament. But I'm like I said a couple of minutes ago, taking the temperature right now and how I feel a lot better about Arizona right this second than a week ago before the tournament because of how well Arizona played, and not just because they beat Akron. It's more about how Arizona played because Akron is they're they're a good competitive team, but I just like the way Arizona played as a team, and I think if they play like that. I think Arizona could beat Duke, and I think Arizona could beat. I think they could beat the winner of BYU Wisconsin and go to the Final Four if they play like they did the other night. And yeah, I really think that this team has a lot of upside moving forward. What do you think? How have your feelings maybe changed in the last week since they played their first game? Do you have a higher ceiling for this team?
Yeah, I think I do. I think their ceiling right now is a Final Four, and I think the way, especially this region, is kind of playing out. I think BYU and Wisconsin, I think, are two matchups that I think that Arizona's obviously struggled with this season, but them being in a pool together and one's going to knock each other out today, and who knows that Alabama, like they were kind of struggling against Robert Morris pretty much from start to the last 2 minutes of that game when they were able to win it by free throws. I know Grant Nelson. We'll see where his health kind of goes. But I think at Arizona's best, I completely agree with you. I think they can play with anybody that's in this pool with them in the region, and I think their peak is a Final Four.
Yeah, so we agree on that. We agree that Arizona will beat Oregon, but we'll have to wait and see if that comes true because Arizona plays Oregon. It's 4 versus 5. It's the Ducks versus the Wildcats. It's Tommy Lloyd versus Dana Altman, 9:40 p.m. Sunday night. It's a great way to cap off the weekend, and hopefully another Final Four or another Sweet 16 that is in Arizona's future. But for now, that's all we have time for. I'm Ryan Wall. He's Jordan Pollock.